Welcome to another episode of Start, Grow and Monetise Your Podcast with myself, Alex Chisnall, and my friend and co-host, James Burtt. We are going to tackle one of the most common questions out there on the internet, online, that people are asking. How do I get my podcast on Spotify? And how do I get my podcast on Apple? James.
So we talked about this in a previous episode. You can go back through your feed or back through the videos and you'll be able to find us going into this in more detail about how to set up an RSS feed and how to set up your platforms. But effectively, when you download a podcast from Spotify or from Apple, you're not actually taking the feed directly from there. There's a middleman. There's what's called an RSS platform. And that's the thing.
The broker.
The broker. Think of him as the broker, the dodgy middleman in the middle, right? So whichever device, whether you're on Google or Android, say whether you're using Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Amazon Music, or you're using Castbox or one of the other 60 Android apps out there, you're using GeoSavan or Ghana. If you're in one of those different,
showing off.
One of those different countries where you might be using, I've forgotten all of the other ones, but you might be using, there's loads of them. But whichever platform you're using, you're not actually downloading the content directly from that platform. You're pulling it from somewhere else. You don't know that, and it's a seamless integration, but you need to set up the back end of your system in the right way. Now, again, we've talked about the hosting platforms, whether you use Libsyn, Buzzsprout, Podbean, Captivate, any of the Acast, any of those platforms. Effectively, they do relatively the same thing. Mm-hmm. So if you want to know how to make sure you optimize your show in terms of show description, SEO keywords and phrases, the artwork, the widescreen artwork, how to make sure you're in the right category, subcategory, and all of those details, check out the previous episode of this podcast that covers that in more detail all around hosting. Or go to PodSchool, click the link in the show description or the show notes, because we've covered this. We get asked this all the time. So there's actually a full video training on this subject in PodSchool, which you can access for free. But effectively, once you've got your RSS feed set up, again, whether it is one of the major providers, Libsyn, Acast, whoever it is, then you need to link your RSS feed to the major platforms. Now, by default, on most of these RSS platforms, they have already done the integration bit with a lot of the big providers. They've already done the agreement. They've already got it in place. So again, if you use like Libsyn, for example, is a platform that I know really well because I've used it again and again. By default, it's linked through to Amazon Music, it's linked through to GeoSavan, it's linked through to Ghana, it's linked through to Castbox, it's linked through to all of the different Android apps, it's linked through to the podcast, what they call the platform ecosystem, what's like a iHeartRadio that they've linked through to. But some of them you have to manually link through to, which is a bit of a pain in the bum. But once you've done it the first time, you're good to go. So if you're on like Libsyn, for example, I don't know about other platforms, some might already have the integration done. But Spotify make you adhere to a term and condition. So basically, in most of those platforms, you have to, by default, a lot of them will already be listed.
Yeah.
If they're not, there's normally almost like a third party, which would be like, do you want to link it through to this platform? Do you want to link it through to this platform? Click yes, and then follow the steps through. So, for example, Samsung, for whatever reason, the Samsung player has got a whole different range of terms and conditions, a different range of stuff you have to fill in. So you do that in your RSS feed, but that's for any Samsung devices. Spotify, the only thing that you're having to do normally is you have to click to read the terms and conditions, that you agree that what you're going to put out to Spotify, you agree with their terms. And you have to tell them the country of origins. You have to let them know where this content was created. And again, whether that's like a royalty thing with Spotify, I don't know. But that's what you have to do in the back end of your RSS feed. You have to link through to Spotify in the majority of cases. You have to click that you agree to the terms and conditions, and you have to let them know the country of origin of that content. The main tricky one is Apple. And surprise. So Apple, in the majority of cases, do not make it easy, and they don't automatically link through to RSS feeds. So you have to basically give the codes that Apple needs to link your show. So try and follow along with what I'm about to say, but if it doesn't make a lot of sense or if it's a bit confusing, as I say, feel free to click the show notes, go through to PodSchool, join us on PodSchool, and somewhere in PodSchool there will be a full training on this exact subject. But effectively, Apple needs you to give them the RSS code. So whichever platform that you go onto, Acast, Libsyn, Buzzsprout, whatever. In there, when you link your show, when you save the show for the first time, you add your artwork, your show description, you choose your categories, your subcategories, your copyright notice, blah, 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 the email address that it's linked to, all that stuff. You click save. That will then automatically create you what's called an RSS feed. So it looks like a URL. It's an RSS feed
bunch
URL.
Of numbers and letters.
Yeah, so it'll be like libsyn.com/RSS/5296
Correct.
JQ, whatever.
Copy and paste that.
Copy and paste that, and then you have to go to what's called Podcast Connect. So again, it will just Google link my podcast to Apple, and it will pop up Apple Podcast Connect. Now you have to have an Apple account to have an Apple Podcast Connect account. So if you haven't got one, there's a whole bunch of steps. Again, we walk through that.
Apple make it nice and easy for you.
Nice and easy. So I wonder that anyone's got a bloody podcast. You would never have imagined that Apple was actually the people that invented podcasting in 2004, considering how backwards it is. But anyway, when you get into your Apple Podcast Connect account, you then have to click Add New Show. And then there's a bunch of information that you have to fill in. And then you have to give them that all-important RSS feed. Now, you can upload your show directly to Apple if you want to. That's entirely doable now. It wasn't back in the day, but you can now. But that would mean that every time you want to put a new episode out, you have to go back into Apple to put all of the episode details in, and that's a right pain in the bum. So what you want to do is link the RSS feed to your player, and then you upload all of the episode information, episode title, description, the audio file, episodic artwork if you're doing that. These days, the transcript, you would upload all that into your RSS feed, and then the platforms pull all that data down for you. So again, without getting too techie, that's how you do it. So you need to go into Apple Podcast Connect, fill in the bunch of stuff that they ask you to give them answers for, and then you need to give them the RSS URL link. And then that's how Apple will connect. You click on the save button, and it normally, if you've done it in the correct way, it will take about 30 to 45 minutes. And within 30 to 45 minutes, you should see the information from your RSS feed pulling into Apple. You should see your artwork. You should see your show description. You should see the information about your podcast, the copyright notice, the email address, and all that kind of stuff. That should be linked through if it's done it correctly. It'll have a little orange dot next to it. It'll say draft. Click that you save changes, and then it should go live. As soon as it goes live, you have then linked your podcast through to Apple Podcasts. Again, that is a bit challenging to even verbalize.
It's easier to see it.
It's very much easier
to
see it. And the training video, I actually do a screen share of me doing it live. So that's much easier to do. So,
and if he can do it, you can do it.
Absolutely. But I'll tell you what, jokes aside, that was the bit that nearly made me never launch a podcast. I remember, I think it was John Lee Dumas did like a podcast training in like 2012, or there was like a podcast episode that he did about it. And I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. I'm going to do a podcast. I got to that episode. I was like, I can't do that. RSS feed, linking it through. Oh my God, it's so much hard work. If you get stuck, by the way, email me or email Alex.
Jump on Podscore. Ask us the question.
Exactly that. And if enough people have a challenge with it, we could we do webinars every week. We do trainings once a month. We do expert sessions with guests. But if enough people on Podscore need that advice again, I'll happily walk people through a live training and I'll do it with you in live in real time. So everyone who hasn't got their show linked up, we can go through it all together at the same time.
And if you think
like a big audio cuddle.
Right, okay. And look, back in the day, Apple used to be even more challenging, because now, as James said, you literally just copy and paste the code, which is the RSS feed. You copy that from your hosting platform, i.e. Acast, whatever.
Libsyn,
Buzzsprout. Paste that into Apple Podcast Connect. Click go live, goes live. Back in the day, you would then get a message saying you'll get a notification within the next 10
to 14 days.
10 to 14 days when your podcast is actually live.
That's right.
And you just have to keep checking every day. And your client will be going, where's my podcast live? Where's my podcast live? And you're like...
I've forgotten all about that. That's
and no one at Apple would ever respond to any communication whatsoever.
No.
Do you like that? Whatsoever.
That's why I started the 14-day promo process. Because on day one, you would launch the fact that you're going to go live with this podcast.
For promoting your podcast.
And you would link Apple on that day as well, because it would take up to 14.
Yeah.
I remember the longest one I ever had took 5 days. And
longer than
have you
double that?
Really?
Yeah, 100% double that.
Yeah, because it used to be the first thing, like you check your email.
Then,
yeah, you would
start sweating and go, did they get my message? I don't know, because
So
no
you
one will reply.
podcasters don't even know you're born. It gets done straight away for you. You've definitely got no excuses. But again, I know that is the techie side of it is the sort of thing that shouldn't be the stumbling block, but I understand and respect why it often is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't need to be. Click the link in the show notes. Click the link in the show description. Join us in Pod School. It's completely free to join. As I say, one of the weekly webinars that will be coming up. If enough people say, hey, I need help with the Apple Podcast Connect bit, I'll actually run you through it live and show you how to do it, because it is much easier to see it live than it is to explain it. And once you've done it, and again, the other thing to reiterate, when you're linking through to Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, all of these other platforms, you only have to do it the one time.
Yeah, you build, again, it comes back to that thing about building your podcast from solid foundations. Do you want everybody to be able to find your podcast and consume your content? Yes. So then you need to tick all of those boxes. And some of the platforms, Acast, I remember, is a very easy one to do, in that they will have a cursor and you literally just slide the button across, and it will literally go like Amazon Music, and then there's a cursor. It's off. Yeah. Slide that across to on, boom, your podcast is automatically on Amazon Music. But for Apple, they make you jump through all of these different hoops, okay? And it's just something you have to do. Apple still has somewhere between 40 and 50% of the market when it comes to podcasts. So you got to go through this hoop to do it. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for you. And some of the other ones are so old school. You literally click the link on Acast, takes you to another web page. You fill out your details, which are always the same. Yeah. You know, what is your name? What email address do you want someone to? Yeah. And it's as simple as that. But you do it once, you will never, ever have to do it again for that specific podcast. So follow the steps. Come over to podcast. Join us on there. Let us know if this is something that you need help with, and we'll help you. As simple as that.
Perfect. We'll see you on the next episode. Ta-da.
Bye.